Black conservatives are everywhere.
That's why I'm here to show my support as a black man for Trump.
Pollsters can't get enough of them.
The historic levels of support the Republicans are getting from black folk under Trump.
Donald Trump is cozying up to them.
Come here, let me give you a hug.
And the RNC was full of them.
President Trump, we have the greatest economy in our lifetime.
America is not a racist country.
Can you imagine President Donald Trump coming to a city and calling a pastor like me?
You've probably heard a lot of people talking about black Republicans, but I spent all of the RNC talking to black Republicans.
So it is with being a black conservative. I equate it to being gay back in the 50s or 60s. You didn't come out the closet then.
And so you look at the people who really saying that about.
That was an interesting comparison.
Yep.
Especially from a pastor too. Compared to being gay from a black pastor, that's a confident comparison they just made right there.
That is.
It's not no uppity Negroes. This Negroes out the real hood.
And that's one reason why I'm pro-Trump and I'm a conservative, is because I truly believe in the individualistic approach to the problems that we see within the black community or in America as a whole.
Black Republicans specifically are some of the most disliked and unpopular political figures within the black community.
So I think we spoke about this a little bit before, but that individualistic take, right? That, I am black as a person, but that doesn't mean that I need to, I think the solutions, as that group. Right. I need to really care about even care that I belong to this group, because I spoke to one of my conservative friends and he was like, why don't white people have a voting block? He's basically like, you got, groups that are supporting, minorities or maybe blacks in particular or Hispanics in particular, and they'll like have their candidates to pursue their agenda. But he was like, who's pursuing the white agenda? And this is a conservative, so he's kind of pro-white and he's on the alt-right, right? So this guy is a little different. But he's like, he wants a pro-white organization movement, which a lot of black people kind of implicitly just join by default. They're like, yeah, if I'm black, we need to be pro-black and have a pro-black agenda that we try to get done in Congress. And that's what he said, you can't have a pro-white agenda because then you sound racist and all that. So he was complaining that he wants to be able to be pro-white, but he can't be pro-white because of how it looks, but it's fine to be pro-black, basically.
That's fair. That's fair. I would say the only, it reminds me of I believe it was like a Mike Wallace, Morgan Freeman interview where he asked Morgan Freeman about Black History Month, and Morgan Freeman was like, I don't want a Black History Month. And he asked him, he's like, well, do you want a Jewish History Month or a White History Month? And now, again, the reporter's answer was no. Again, the person that you were talking to sounds like their answer may have been yes, that they would actually want one. But Morgan Freeman was saying in the context of not wanting a Black History Month, where he was like, I think the best way to get rid of racism is just to stop talking about it. And I understand that take. And to be fair, if there's a Black History Month, just like to be fair, if there's like a Latin History Month, I haven't seen it, but if we're representing different cultures, then I wouldn't be against it. I think that's fair. I think it's fair to have that representation if Black people are doing it and other races are doing it. I would only say the reason why that it's being done in the American context is because disproportionately Black people were disadvantaged and their history was destroyed. And so we had to create some sort of acknowledgement and way of recognizing and learning about and appreciating Black history because it was discouraged and we had those systemic disadvantages. So I understand why we have a Black History Month, but I understand in a fair context just of removing it in general. I would understand that. Or if we're going to have a Black History Month, I understand fairly having a White History Month. I mean,
So here's one thing I don't like. Here's one thing, and this is a criticism I had for the conservative friend I'm talking. I mentioned. He seemed to imply that, he needed a pro-white agenda, because if we had a pro-white agenda, then it would like make things better for white people. I'm like, so you tie your success to the success of white people? I'm like, you think I tie my success to the success of black people?
Black people, right?
No, like I'm gonna handle my business regardless. You know, like if black people don't do well, unfortunately, I'm still gonna do what I gotta do, right? And if they do great, then that's fine. But it's not like I'm sitting around like, man, if they finally stop, discriminating against black folks, then I can get ahead. Like that's not the mentality you need to have. You need to have I'm gonna go get ahead myself. And I think that might have been that black conservative angle. He's like, well, I'm not thinking in terms of like a group. I'm more thinking in terms of individualistic solutions. So like, even though there are like, issues that are at a group level, and there are things we can improve at a group level, if your personal mentality is I'm gonna sit around and wait until the group gets better, that's not a good strategy.
No, it's not. And I can understand. So like, if you're talking about the black people in general, I think the root of our issues is cultural. I think that's just like, if you get down to the root, I think it's all culture. And I think if you're a Republican, and just like as it relates to him, you're wanting to tie yourself to individual perspectives or ideologies, because you want to see yourself as being able to rise by your own metrics without a handout from society. But there's also the opposing side, and it's not even to say that it's an opposing side, but it's just the history of the group that you so happen to be a part of. It's just like, there are a lot of factors related to your family's history, whether or not you choose to identify as black or not, to where the reason why your white friends live in suburbs, or the reason why they have housing and land that dates back to generations, is because there have been generational advantages. And I think I can understand someone wanting to be an individual and wanting to rise by their own metrics, but I can also, and this is a conservative principle that I actually respect, but I could also understand, and I give value to historical context, into where if you disproportionately disadvantage a group, and you had that built into the system, I think even as an unbiased moral agent, especially given precedents, you would want to, number one, you would want to make or atone for those actions. And that's not black people saying like, hey, I'm benefiting because of my skin. It's just like, I'm benefiting because of what was occurred previously, and why I am not on the same equal footing with everybody else in society. And I think where it's just like, I can understand that individual perspective.
I just want to say, it's not everybody else, because there's a lot of poor white folks too.
There is,
for different reasons.
Right. I was just about to say it's there, and that's where it's just like a lot of people, and this is where I don't even agree with this perspective amongst black people, but like they say, I don't give to white homeless men. I'm like, that's kind of messed up. And they're just like, because white broke and black broke is different. And just like you say, hey, they are poor for different reasons. But it's just like, I'm like, if you're going to give to somebody who is unfortunate, give. And I understand their perspective, but it's just like, I don't respect it. But yeah, they're poor for different reasons. But I would say the reason why black people would say that, or I've heard black people say that, is because they're saying, like, I'm poor because my mom was poor and my dad was poor. They poor because
they made bad decisions.
Right. And that's why they're attributing to having less guilt for not giving to them in that context. But I respect conservative positions like this. Like in terms of being an individual, I respect that, but I still think that there are certain advantages from a group perspective that we have to atone for because America was racial before we start being colorblind.
Yeah, I think that the individual perspective is the most useful one because that's the only thing you got control over. You don't got control over, over the history, over the politics of what we're going to do about that history. Unless you're a politician, maybe, and even then you only got one vote and you probably got to vote along party lines. So it's the most useful one, but it does dismiss a very relevant and true and large amount of history and circumstance.
Agree.
For a reason.
I'm pissed.
Of the 4 Black Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives, zero represent majority Black districts.
I am royally pissed.
In fact, they all represent majority white districts, something they seem to be very proud of.
South Carolina is majority white, correct? Yeah, it's gorgeous. My district is majority white district. Your Utah is majority white district, correct? Michigan, Florida, is your district majority white district? Well, how do we get here?
Like, a lot of white people had to vote for it.
There is an obvious disconnect, and that's what I want to explore today. I wanted to know what draws a Black person to identify with this Republican Party.
Trump has been for Black people, regardless of what the media say for a long time.
The Bible say we perish through a lack of knowledge, right? So until you teach the people, that's the only way they're going to learn. So it's our job, me especially as a Black conservative, to get out there, get on the ground, and teach these people all about the Black conservative movement. And when you look at the movement now, especially right now, we speaking, baby.
I learned a lot about Black Republicans in these conversations. Their motivation.
That's where it's like, I get it. And this is where I will cross the line, unfortunately, talking about it. But his very first example is like, and it's not even bad context, but it's the religious component that, like,
I think that's why you got Black conservatives. I mean,
right.
That's probably like
right.
A lot of the conservatives that are Black,
right?
They're conservative for religious reasons, right?
Absolutely.
There's a big block on the Republican side is the evangelicals, right? So like you have that religious part, and Black folks are religious, right? So if you kind of have you're getting pulled in two different directions, right? You have the fact that tend to be the poor and working class, which kind of pulls you to the Democrat side because they're going to try to help you out. But then you have the religious part, which is going to pull you to the Republican side.
Absolutely. And that's where it's just like, that's the unfortunate component, because I think Black people who are extremely religious, like, there are going to be some ideologies that are going to automatically, I'll give my grandmother, for example. She used to always preach about any president who is for Israel, that's who we're supposed to be with. Like, because like there are instances in the Bible where like we're supposed to support Israel. Like that is the ideology that's supposed to be put forth. And it's just like, it's unfortunate that just your religious perspective is going to automatically put you into a conservative bucket. And I think it's unfortunate because it doesn't even give you the opportunity to really look at the other side or even give the other side a fair chance and you would say as a Black person that like you would assume that most Black people are Democrat. But when you really get into the religious sector, like the very first, other than this guy where we just paused at, his example was a biblical example. We perish for lack of knowledge. But the very first person that he interviewed at the beginning of this video was a Black pastor. And it's just like, so now you have a Black pastor who was speaking, you have this man who's giving a biblical reference, and it's just like, it's unfortunate that you're seeing that religious component before you even get into the political, because it's just like that religious component by default has already classified you.
Yeah, and you got Trump running as a Christian or part of the Christian nationalist movement, so that might even help him out.
And that's even worse. It's just like, and unfortunately, if you look at Trump's biggest supporters, it's the white uneducated, so it's white people without a college degree, and it's white evangelicals and black evangelicals. And that is, it's unfortunate to say that the most uneducated and religious people, it's just like, man, it's just like those are the two, and he wins with both of them. And it's just like, and that is, it's a reflection of the party, and that's what I'll say for the moment. But I just wanted to point out that when I heard that biblical reference, I'm just like, the first interview was a pastor. This dude is already given a biblical reference. And it's just like, it's unfortunate that most black Republicans are going to be there by default, just based on religion.
And I think that's partially a consequence of people who are single issue voters, right? So it's not like your grandmother is a single issue voter where she's trying to, trigger the end times, get Jesus to come back, whatever, right? So she's like, whatever you got to do, pro-Israel. Anything else don't matter, right? We pro-Israel, and that's what we're going to do, right? And then, other people that are like, hey, whichever party seems to be the most pro-Christianity, even if all the other policies are they disagree with, a lot of, I'm not going to say most people, but there are a large number of people who only care about they may only care about abortion, whether that's whatever side of the issue they're on. They may only care about abortion. They may only care about economics, or whatever. So I think anybody that's a single issue voter, it's kind of hard to change them. They're kind of locked in.
To me, that's unfortunate, but I think single issue without a religious component is malleable. But I think once you have a religious component, I don't think that's malleable at all. I mean, in rare cases.
What is malleable? Like the abortion people? I mean, abortion is often tied to religion. So I'll concede that. But I do think there's, let's say you're like a rich person, right? Like I'm a billionaire. Whoever going to cut my taxes, I don't care about nothing else. Like whenever you doing to other people's money and they, foreign policy and they abortion, you don't care about that. Who going to cut my taxes? Because I pay too many taxes. Right? There's a lot of those people, and whoever is going to cut it the most, that's getting the vote.
I would understand that for rich people, but I'm saying and that would be their bias. But to me, a religious component is it's more permanent to me. It's just something that it's almost like an unchangeable piece where by default, once you have that whatever religious component it is, whether it be abortion, whether it be that he represents, he's claiming to represent Christians or he's claiming to be pro-Israel, just once you find that you are unchanged. You cannot be changed, and I think that
I was gonna say it's funny that Donald Trump represents Christian values.
He does,
that's hilarious. He represents two gangster values. What he represents, he got 3 different baby mamas, married a bunch of times, authorities coming after him.
So
go
play the hotels,
paying off porn stars. This is the evangelical. This is the man of God. This is the new savior. Come on.
As Trump would say, when he looked up to this, I am the chosen one. That's exactly what he is, the chosen one. And it's just that's their guy. That is the religious sector's guy. And this video is certainly going to play out, and it's going to play out on both sides, actually, if I'm not mistaken. You're going to see the white religious side as well as the black religious side, and how even from I believe there was a Baptist organization to where it even created fractures to where the people who were for this, or the original people who were a part of that organization, they were all for Trump and attended Trump rallies, and these black people like, or predominantly Black oriented Baptist churches are just like, I don't know if this is something that I want to be a part of anymore. Like, I don't want to be a part of y'all's organization if y'all automatically are going to be positioned with this ideology. So I will give credit to some Black religious institutions where they're just like, Trump don't represent our values. He doesn't represent our culture, and we want to separate ourselves. So I will give some credit to those, but yeah, he largely represents those people. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Their stories, their goals. These are real people with genuinely held beliefs. Beliefs that I largely disagree with, and I told them as much.
It wasn't policy. It was white people.
Well, white people. It was
no. Let's be very clear. It was white people. No.
I tried to have respectful dialogue with them. So in this video, I want to share these people with you, but I'll also share some of my reflections on the experience of listening to, fact-checking, and disagreeing with Black Republicans. I learned a lot about Black Republicans, and I think you will too. So with that, let's dig in. In talking to Black Republicans, I found that their most consistent ideological North Star was an emphasis on personal responsibility. For those I spoke to, there was a real value for rigid individualism as opposed to collective progress and identity. Take Topher, for example. He's a Christian rapper, has millions of followers online, and believes, according to him, in an individualistic approach to progress for Black people.
And that's one reason why I'm pro-Trump and I'm a conservative, is because I truly believe in the individualistic approach to the problems that we see within the Black community or in America as a whole. And you can think about it, Black Wall Street, Harlem Renaissance, all that time, we was doing great. But when the policies came in and started destroying the Black community slowly and slowly, matter of fact, it was supposed to get rid of poverty or at least lessen it, but we have more poverty now than we had back then.
I think you'll notice a theme of dissonance present in these interviews. On the one hand, for example, Topher endorses an individualistic approach to solving the problems we face as a community. But on the other hand, he points to Black Wall Street or the Harlem Renaissance, communities that I would consider on the Mount Rushmore of Black collective power. And he points to them as times we should look back on with admiration. And the question is, which one is it? Is it rigid individualism where we get it out of the mud on our own? Or is it about creating communities where we work together to build our collective resources? What's also interesting is that somehow for him, these communities no longer exist because of liberal or progressive policy decisions.
But when the policies came in and started destroying the Black community slowly and slowly, matter of fact, it was supposed to get rid of poverty or at least lessen it, but we have more poverty now than we had back then.
I think.
So I want to share a little bit about I took a course. It was called it was a theology course I had to take in undergrad.
Okay.
It was a theology course, and it was taught by a Black professor. And for some reason, it wasn't even that much about theology. It was more about kind of like Black history almost a little bit.
Okay.
And he had a similar perspective as the one that the people he's interviewing has, where he's basically saying, okay, and the perspective is basically anti civil rights, which is odd for a Black person, right? It's a Black professor, right? It's a Black professor, anti-civil rights, pro-segregation, okay?
Pro-segregation,
yes,
segregation.
Yes,
that's extreme.
Yeah, and so I had this is a class, so I got to take tests about this stuff, right? So I'm like, all right, let me make sure I understand what is being said, because basically we had trouble because he thought I was a heckler, because I'm like, what do you mean, civil rights is bad? What do you mean segregate? So I'm challenging. He think I'm just trying to be a pain. I'm not trying to be a pain, but I'm gonna have to take tests. I'm gonna have to write papers for you. I need to understand what I'm talking about. If this is what you're saying, it don't make sense to me. So I gotta get to it. So we had some problems early on, because I think he thought I was bad faith, but I'm not bad faith. I just this is not easy to swallow. A lot of other kids, like, they don't, a lot of people, they don't really interact. These kind of, I'm at class, I'm sitting here, right. I'm gonna go home. Or I'm like, hold on, what'd you just say? What?
Right. Like, they're just there, but they're not really taking in that information.
Right. But anyway, let me get to. Sorry to cut you off. But back to what he was. The reason I brought him up is his argument was basically that before civil rights, back, and when we had segregation, Black folks couldn't go anywhere, basically, right? Like we had to stick together. It wasn't a choice but to stick together in our own communities. He said, and when we had to stick together in our own communities, what happened was you had the educated Black folks would become the leaders of that community. They would, they would learn things, and then they would, start schools, and you would have a fully Black area that had high quality Black leaders in it that kind of led the area and brought everybody up. They would do business, with each other and all of that. And you had a thriving Black community. And he said what happens after civil rights and you end segregation is now those Black successful leaders, they can leave, right? And they leave and they go to white areas. I went to white area, right? So they leave and they go to white areas. And what you have is basically only the poor Blacks left over that didn't have the education or the skills. And the Black people that do have the skills and education just go to white areas, and you end up with a lack of leadership and community. And you just end up with like just the worst left over and high crime rates and stuff. And that's why he personally, even though he's a college professor, he said, I still live in the hood. He said, and I choose to do so because I want to be that resource in the community. I don't want to be just another person that, made it and then leaves and then, good luck to everybody else. So that's why he was pro segregation. He said, because it was better for us during that time period. I'm like, I can understand it being better for the Black community, but I don't want it to be better because I can't go nowhere else.
I understand that perspective, but no, segregation isn't the way to go, especially in a society where you have to exist reasonably with other races. It's just like, and why would you even want to separate yourself based on races? It's like that's just something that you can't choose.
It's not good principally, but he was just saying effectively we had talent and leadership before and guidance, and we lost that as soon as we, those people were able to leave.
Yeah, it's and that's where, to me, like, if he was a Black conservative, I think that's where in this example you have contradicting opinions, where it's just like, if you're talking about an individualist perspective, are you Republican for individual perspectives?
Well, no, he wasn't individual. He was community. He was all about community.
All right. It's just like, or are you going to bring up community perspectives and Black Wall Street and all of that? Because like, if just like in this example with that dude, he was bringing up both.
He was both. My professor wasn't contradicting himself. He was all about the community. And he was saying that lack of segregation kept the community together. But I can't argue. I mean, we forced to be together.
Right. Yeah. It's just like that's by force. That's no choice. I think I would prefer us to come together by choice, and I would even imagine that it would be a better society, or we would have better application from us coming together by choice than that being something that the government requires. That's just bad.
Yeah, it's bad policy, and I disagreed with him. But like, imagine you did have folks like me and you, my dad, and like like people in it, like that would help if if all the Black kids had people like us to talk to, like
for sure,
would be great. Like we would be better. I still disagree with segregation, but he's not. I don't think he's wrong that there is value in having strong leaders that ain't drug dealers. To live
Absolutely, he's absolutely right about that. And it's just like, if I think that you still have those ideas and concepts, but you hold it just like your professor, like you do it in application like your professor does. Instead of, he's a man with means, he's a professor. Sure, he's probably been there a few years, might be tenured, has a decent salary. So he could afford to live in the suburbs of New Orleans, wherever he's at. He could afford to live in the suburbs, have a decent life. He's choosing not to. And I think that choice that's where it's honorable. And that's where that community can be built and not forced. Like, and if more people made that choice and were conscious, then I think that's how you build a community. But forcing it, I think that's not the way you build a fair society.
Right.
I think it's worth pointing out that this more poverty now than back then line is verifiably false. It falls in line with a theme that people like Byron Donalds have advanced continuously throughout this election cycle. The idea that we were better off in any way during the Jim Crow era.
During Jim Crow, the black family was together.
Yeah, that's right.
During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative, because black people always have been conservative minded, but more black people voted conservatively.
It's worth noting that the black poverty rate has been falling ever since black people started receiving civil rights protections. It's almost as if these progressive policies worked.
Now, you mentioned Black Wall Street, brother, and I want to be very real with you.
Yeah.
Black Wall Street was Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Greenwood District, where black people built their own community, had their own self-sustained community, beautiful economy, making it for themselves, and white people destroyed it.
Yeah.
It wasn't policy. It was white people.
Well, white people. It was
no. Let's be very clear. It was white people. No.
It was those white people.
It was white people in that community. Absolutely.
Exactly.
And let me just say this: Elaine, Arkansas, Rosewood in Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, the Sweet Auburn District, North Nashville in Nashville, Tennessee. Each one of these communities were booming black economies where white people, not in the same place, but it was the same group of people every time, destroyed those communities. So you can't say it's policy when when black people do what they need to do and build for themselves and white people destroy it. Yeah. So why is it that you would frame it as a policy thing?
I didn't frame it as a policy thing.
We can rewind it.
You said it was white people.
You mentioned.
I said it wasn't white people. It was those white people. And the reason why I'm saying that is because now we're trying to categorize all white people as evil.
No.
And what I'm trying to say is back then, because a lot of people don't know this, I'm gonna put this on record. Black Wall Street rebuilt themselves after that. 4 years after that, Black Wall Street rebuilt everything they had, and they prospered for the next 40 years until policy came in and destroyed it because they decided to build a freeway over their town, and that destroyed. So what I'm saying is, if we look at policy and the cultural essence of most things, right? It's not just policy, it's culture.
I was trying to draw a distinction between the nature of progressive policy, like the Civil Rights Act, or Supreme Court decisions to overturn segregation, and white supremacist policy, like destroying black communities. But the subject kept changing. Lucky for you, I actually made a video about Tulsa, Oklahoma's Greenwood District. It was definitely white racism that destroyed Black Wall Street and other black communities through explicitly racist acts of state-sanctioned violence. This is why an accurate, full telling of history is so important. Black oppression and black progress have always had a collective quality to them. Black people have been, throughout American history, targeted as a group, from slavery to black codes to Jim Crow to mass incarceration to anti-inclusion efforts today. But we've also made progress by harnessing the power of collective action during Reconstruction and the Civil Rights Movement, and even today during the black-owned business boom.
From LBJ, that's why you say we have these Negroes voting Democrat for the next 200 years. But all those policies have not done what they promised. Would you agree?
I would not agree.
So you think we're better off as black people now than we were before LBJ passed those policies?
Yes, brother. We can vote without the threat of violence. Are you talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1964? Is that what you're describing as a negative thing?
I'm not saying the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was. I'm talking about.
That's LBJ. I just want to be clear. That's LBJ, who you said, were we better off before LBJ? LBJ signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
I'm talking about the war on poverty.
I just want to answer that one. I want to answer that specific one first. Was the Civil Rights Act of 1964 bad?
I agree with the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Thank you.
But at the same time, I'm also put like this. I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery.
I don't know what that means. Explain more.
What it means is I would rather, given the fact that even back then we still had our families together, communities were stronger back then, I'd rather deal with the dangerous freedom of not knowing and controlling people with policies as much as possible versus the peaceful slavery of being married and tied to the government.
Given Trump's well-documented history of saying and doing racist things, I wanted to know how these black people could be drawn into Trump's political orbit. So I talked to Pastor Lorenzo Sewell.
Yeah, so anyone that wants to come to church, they're able to come. So when President Trump called, I thought about it like you calling me and say, hey, Pastor, I want to invite a friend to church who has 34 felonies. Hey, Pastor, I want to invite a friend to church who is a womanizer. Hey, Pastor, I want to invite a friend to church who could be a racist.
He's the lead pastor at a black church in Detroit that Trump visited earlier this year. And he was also a featured speaker at the RNC.
So all my friends back in Detroit who are Democrats, I want to ask you just one simple question. You can't deny the power of God on this man's life. You can't deny that God protected him. Could it be?
I don't like that argument, man. I do not like that argument.
The dangerous one that God protected him from that bullet. And...
No, I mean, it's bigger picture than that. That like basically anything that happened, you can't deny that God, wanted him to be president because he's president first time. Well, if your female friend got raped, well, he was part of God's plan. So what are you talking about? Like, just because it happened, it must be good because it happened. God must have wanted it to happen. Like, what are you talking about? Like, like so many bad things happen. To make that argument is ridiculous. Because it happened, it must have been because God wanted it. So when someone gets raped, is that get out of here.
I mean, it's there's a convenient factor for stuff that is good being attributed to God, and if it's bad, it's not God, it's the devil. And if it's not the devil, it was God's will. I mean, that's.
But then why couldn't Trump's rise be the devil then?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not saying he's that bad.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying he's that bad. But my point is that a lot of people just they'll be like, oh, well, since he won, it must have been part of God's plan. You start putting stuff on God's name. And don't be putting nothing on God's name. Like, you don't know what God wanted.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't like that.
That Jesus Christ preserved him for such a time as this. Could it be?
Why should Black people support the Republican ticket and Donald Trump specifically?
That's a good question. What I would say to any Black person is this, specifically about the Republican platform. I would say, look, do your research, right? I would say, look back to 170 years ago in this state where a group of patriots stood up and they started that grand old party to stop the expansion of slavery. If a Black person said, well, Pastor, Donald Trump is racist, the Republican Party is racist, well, let's play that theme out throughout history. Let's look at who was the party of slavery, who was the party of Jim Crow, right? Who's the party...
Well, things changed over time. So he's right. It was Abraham Lincoln was a Republican back then. It was Democrats that were the racist party, but that's not how it has been in recent, last 100 years or so.
Yep, he's absolutely right. There was a switch, and I wanted to get a little bit more informed on why that switch happened, like why historically it was, and I believe it was historically Democrats were in the South, if I'm not mistaken. And
those Southern Democrats. Yep, and that's the economy, agriculture, that's slavery.
Yep, yeah. I believe it was the Civil War that the switch happened, and it was for racial reasons, and that's why I'm not like when people talk about that and then they talk about, well, look at your history. It's just like the reason why Black people switched from Democrats to Republicans, if I'm not mistaken, is because Democrats were largely your southern states and they largely represented the slave economy. Abraham Lincoln was the Republican Party. That's when you got the Emancipation Proclamation, things of that nature. And so like there was a time in which Democrats were for that, and then it switched. There were, and I believe it was the Civil War in which that's
going back that far in history just irrelevant to me. It's like talking about well, Carlos, your great grandfather was mean. It's like, okay, what's that got to do with you?
Right? I mean, even going back that far in history is it. Like I understand, but they're still even using it in the wrong context, because the reason that Black people made the switch was for racial reasons, and that's where I think they're doing that.
What do you mean Black people made the switch? You mean why the parties made the switch?
Right. I mean, and why Black people made a switch from voting for
Republican to voting Democrat.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Exactly.
The slave codes. Well, those are Democrats. Let's have that conversation. And when you look at when the Senate was integrated, those were Black Republicans. When we look at Frederick Douglass, Black Republican. So that's on the political side, why I believe that a Black American should be willing to look at the Republican platform. In terms of my political convictions as a pastor, my conviction in my heart. A Black woman's womb is the most dangerous place for a Black child to be. So if a Black American, specifically a Black woman, my conversation would be, give our Black babies a chance. Look at the Republican Party in terms of President Donald J. Trump. This is what I would say. Don't look at the container, look at the content, right? Don't look at the man, look at the mission, right? Don't look at his past. Look at what your agenda is for your community in the future.
Conservatives are leading the charge to remove protections for voting rights, protections for maternal mortality, interventions in California, affirmative action, diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are all issues that pertain directly to the people that I know that you serve in your community. Why should they support the party behind the hindrance, the advancement of the very things that I know you stand for?
Sure. Black people that I know, that I represent, that I've had these conversations with, they don't want to be put in a position because they're Black. There's not one Black person I know that will say to me, Lorenzo, I deserve this position because I'm Black.
But I want to. But you know that that's not what DEI is. DEI is about fair hiring practices, opening up opportunity, like creating pathways.
But you're smart. You're an intelligent man, and those that would say this, I believe they're very intelligent. It costs more money not to hire the person who's the best than to be racist. It actually costs more money. So
that's an interesting argument. That's an interesting argument there. Milton Friedman, I want to say it was Milton Friedman, the economist, made a similar argument for women. So this is back when they were talking about women being involved in the workforce. And basically what Milton Friedman argument was, he said, well, if women are as good as men and you can pay them less than men, then that means the companies that are going to win are the companies that are going to hire women, right? Because if they're equally as good and they're cheaper, then you have a competitive advantage by hiring a bunch of women. And he said, and if not, well, then maybe they're not as good as as you're arguing that they are. So he's basically saying, let the free market, decide. Where here's the thing: the free market isn't a perfect engine. Right. It's not a perfect engine, and there's especially at the high end, there's a lot of networking and stuff. And if I'm a leader of a company or whatever, I want to work with people I like, right? People I like might just tend to be people like me. That's another reason probably women don't get involved. And it may not even be direct sexism. It may just be, most of the networking and getting to know people happens on the golf course. And do women play golf as much as men? Well, if they don't, they're going to miss out on those opportunities. And then would that be because of, outright sexism? No, it's just that when they were on the golf course last week, someone said something pretty clever, and he said, you know what, that guy seems pretty sharp. And then the woman didn't have a chance to even have that interaction. So him saying that, the market would just naturally solve for DEI because it's too expensive to be racist. Like, tell that to a racist. Tell that to somebody who does run a racist shop. It's like, you could make a little more money. You save a little money if you hired a Black person. Like, think they're gonna hire a Black person? No. They ain't gonna hire a Black person. So yeah, that argument is like, if you had like a perfect, unbiased, purely self-interested capitalistic system, in the long run, maybe. But practically, if you do have people that are, racist, discriminatory, you think they're going to care about that? No, they're just going to hire people they like and call it a day.
Absolutely. It's just like they didn't care about it when segregation was occurring and there was Black dollars that they could earn. They were just like, no, we will lose money. If I'm a racist, I will lose money at that expense. It's just like, I will not. These are white only pies. These are white only coffee. It's just like, I will lose money to sell less coffee.
Right. Here's the thing. They might even make money selling less coffee because they told the white people that they're on their side.
Right.
Right. So even though they lose Black customers, they get to say, hey,
get white loyalty.
We don't have that over here. You go that other shop, you might run into some Black folks over there. You ain't gonna run into them over here.
Right.
It's a higher quality shop, right? So they get to make that racist argument. They might even make more money from it. So yeah, that whole argument of capitalism will handle that by itself. you got to be careful assuming what capitalism is going to handle, because capitalism is a good system, but there's certainly it has tendencies towards monopolies and a lot of other coordination. Even if you don't have monopolies, you maybe have a duopoly or something like that, where the two people, two competitors collude to keep prices high or whatever. And then you got the good old boys club at the top. It's not nearly as clean as you want it to be, and if it is clean, it's only clean in the long run. And as John Maynard Keynes, another economist, said, it might be true in the long run, but in the long run, we're all dead. So
absolutely. I agree, though. I agree wholeheartedly.
Well, if you're the best at what you do, right? And let's just say I'm a racist. So let's just say that, let's play that out, right? And let's just say, hey, there are 20 white guys that are not as competent as you, but I'm not going to pick you because you're black. It's going to cost me more money.
They don't even know that this qualified person exists, right?
Sure, I hear you.
The pathways are the problem. And a lot of what diversity, equity, and inclusion is doing is creating those and helping to clarify those pathways. And so framing it as an unqualified person getting the job when we know.
Well, no, the way he phrased it is, you're clearly the very best by some significant margin, assuming, right? Like obviously you're the best. And then you have these 20 white guys who are like way behind you, so why would I? It's like, maybe in that case you pick, but in a lot of cases, like, you're not going to be like way better. That's another stereotype people say, is that like you got to be 10 times better to even get in, right? It's like if you're just equally good, or even slightly better, but it's close, it's arguable. And it's like, okay, well, they just go with the white guy because that's the one they like. And, good luck.
Yep. And that's even, just like you said, it's black anecdotal, like passed down knowledge that they say is just like, you got to be 3 times better at the job in order to get the job. It's just like, that's exactly what they say. It's just like, and
that's the example that he just gave. It was like you got to be way better for them to consider. It was like why couldn't I just be equally good?
Right.
Why not? Like, why?
Right. Right.
Because his point was like, it'll cost you money, but it's like the fact he had to set it up such that the black candidate was way better. It's like, in real life, you're probably not going to be that much better. You're probably just going to be right about average,
right?
And then at that point, you're just in a mix of, there's 20 white guys and there's you, and who do they want to work with?
And it's probably ain't gonna be you. That's what he just don't get.
No, you and I both know that there are plenty of qualified Black people or Latino people or women who don't end up with jobs.
100%. And I agree with you. I do think relationships and proximity matter.
In his book, The Grift, Clay Cane details the history of how Black conservatives have thrown Black people under the bus to get ahead personally. From Black Republicans like Isaiah Montgomery and Booker T. Washington to modern Black Republicans like Clarence Thomas. Clay Cane makes the case that the modern Black Republican is likely, if not assuredly, a grifter, a person who is doing that which is politically expedient rather than doing what is right, doing whatever they need.
Oh, I didn't mean to speed it up right there. I don't like this angle. I don't like
it either. I don't like it. I was going to say the exact same thing. I don't, even if it may be true, I don't like it.
And I don't think it's true. I think most Black conservatives are, and they just think that, either they're conservative for religious reasons or for individual reasons, but I don't think they're like trying to scam somebody or like, this is like reading in too much negativity into the average Black, conservative.
I'm right there with you. I completely agree. And that's exactly what I was going to say. Ironically, you paused it right there because I was just like, I don't like that angle. I don't like the angle either. I will say with Clarence Thomas, I agree. but him only just because I have watched the Frontline documentary on him, and I have a little bit more insight on him. So that's just my personal opinion of Clarence in particular, but I don't like it. I 1,000% agree with you. I don't like that angle. I don't like classifying Black Republicans as
Uncle
grifters and Uncle Toms
and
just saying that they can't have a unique perspective. I don't like that. I think that's disrespectful.
Right. Yeah, I think politics tends to just go too negative too often. It's just like they can't just be somebody you disagree with. They got to be grifters now. So
right. Like that's a little bit too far. And it's just like I'm 1,000% with you.
need to do to get that all expenses paid trip to fancy places. I couldn't help but wonder if some of the folks I was talking to fit that description. So I asked Pastor Lorenzo whether or not he was a grifter.
In my reporting, I've spoken to Clay Kane, who wrote a book about grifters, how sometimes Black Republicans will align themselves with political power for their own personal advantage.
Sure.
What do you say to a person who says, hey, like, you're a talented, gifted person, but we didn't necessarily know who you were, but now you're speaking on one of the biggest platforms in the world tonight?
Quite frankly, I don't need another opportunity to speak. Has the Republican Party said, Lorenzo, we're going to write you a big check? No. If they did, it's just going to go right to the community anyway, right at the end of the day, because that's where my salary goes.
You've mentioned Frederick Douglass and others from the 1800s, early 1900s. In those times, Black Republicans were elected by Black people.
Sure.
Today, Black Republicans, they're elected in majority white districts.
Agreed.
Why is it difficult, maybe even some would say impossible for a Black Republican to be elected in a Black?
That's a good question. You know what? I'll wrestle with that. I think the biggest problem is the Republican Party, in my opinion, they have, I believe, drifted from their roots in terms of Black people having authority within that party. I don't believe the Republican Party has learned well how to support financially those who are Black Republicans that want to come out the closet. I equate it to being gay back in the 50s or 60s, right? Or even 70s. You didn't come out the closet then, like the movie Philadelphia, right? Because you could be ostracized. So it is with being a Black conservative. We have been, the Lord has blessed our church. He's been very kind to us to really serve our community. However, me just having President Trump at our church, if I could play the voicemail, sir, these are the ones I haven't had time to delete. If I could send you the emails where it's like, really? I mean, people that I thought loved me, they're like calling me everything but a child of God. I'm like, hold on for a second. Can we have a conversation? Why are you like?
How does that make you feel?
You know, I was a drug dealer. I was a street pharmacist, right? Former.
I ain't surprised, man. This dude's like a used car salesman. He does. He got that positive smile. I like Terry Crews. He almost has a Terry Crews-ish smiles. Like, this guy's slick.
Yeah.
He's slick. You gotta watch out for him.
Yeah.
Like, he reminded me of Vivek Ramaswamy, honestly. Vivek's slick too. I ain't saying he's a drug dealer, but Vivek's slick.
Yeah, he's slick too. I don't like it's something. A car salesman is perfect. It's just like there's something about him that I don't trust. He may have a good smile. It's just like, but he seems, there's something about him. It's just like, I'm just not down. I don't trust. I don't like
it. Even what he says, if they did write me a big check, that's going right to the community. It's like, really? Because I care about the community. I'm like, if I got a big check, is it all going right to the community? No, I'm going to be honest about it. I'm going to tell you, it ain't going right to the community.
and if he's a pastor that has a salary, and just like he said, just like my salary goes to the community, I don't know him personally, but I do know the religious sector, and especially African Americans in the religious sector. I highly doubt that his salary. I don't know. I can't know it for
unless he calls himself the community. I am the community.
All right, I was just. I highly doubt that that's going right back to the community. But you're right. Like, yep. But he is. My name is community.
So, people that you love are hurts. I have to be frank with you, you know. But other people that don't know you, don't understand your motives, I get it. When tensions are high, motives are questions. And tensions have been high in our country as it pertains to politics. So people question my motives. I understand that. But for the people that love you, it hurts. It really does. And that's the reason why Black people won't come out the closet.
A relatively small percentage of Black people will vote for Trump this November. But I have a take and I want to share it with you. A more inclusive and racially diverse Republican Party could be a good thing. American conservatives and Republicans have made the lives of Black people difficult on purpose. From the Southern strategy to welfare queens to anti-woke, anti-DEI stuff today, American conservatives have galvanized their white base by making the lives of Black people harder. It could be a good thing to see more Black Republicans if it means that the Republican Party is becoming actively hostile to the racists who have called that party their home for the last 60 years at least. Make American politics inhospitable to racists. I'm all in on that platform. But the reality is that racists, or at least racism enablers, were present and accounted for at the RNC. They were given stage time, had exclusive access, and seemed central to the whole operation. And I'll tell you what did not feel central. Black people. I actually attended the Black delegate event during the RNC, and something really interesting happened. The event was taking place away from the main convention center. And in the middle of it, unexpectedly, former President Donald Trump's motorcade could be heard approaching the event from a distance. People have been having a great time before that moment, but you should have seen the excitement on people's faces when they realized it was Trump approaching their event. It really felt like this big moment of acknowledgement, the perfect punctuation in a banner year for Black Republicans. Journalists and news crews were scrambling to get into position to make sure they captured that moment when he comes to this event. But then his motorcade just drove by. It turned out he wasn't coming to the event. It wasn't on his schedule. It just happened to be along his route.
He waved at us.
The disappointment for this group of Black Republicans was tangible. And
didn't see it.
That's terrible.
And kind of poetic. And I think that's my big concern with the future of the Republican Party. The RNC had quite a few drive-by acknowledgments that Black people exist, but little to no substantive action plans for how they would show up and be present with and for this community. And if I'm honest with you, I think that's on purpose. The only way the Republican Party becomes this ideologically conservative but racially inclusive big tent party is if there is a fundamental rejection of the people and policy and practice they currently hold as sacred, near and dear to their political vision. As long as the GOP makes racial justice a political issue worth fighting against, a majority of Black people will never vote for the party. As long as teaching Black history is woke, as long as race-conscious solutions to race-conscious problems are demonized, as long as they commit to denying racism's impact on society, Black people, by and large, are not going to vote for them. But these guys may. And that might be good enough for them.
I think that conclusion is about right. Like if you're a Republican strategist, it's like going on a real pro-Black agenda. This is not going to work for a Republican. You're not going to beat the Democrats in that area. But you can put some on TV, invite some celebrities out and stuff, and just hope to peel a few percentage off, and that might make the difference. Like I'm not gonna do anything for you, but I'm gonna show that it's okay to be on our side and hope I capture a few percentage.
Right. And that's where the perspective that he had where he was like, I'm okay for Black people being on that side if it means making Republicans not necessarily more sympathetic, because I don't like that word, but just more conscious of racism. And it's just like, I'm like, that's a respectable position. It's just like if
I mean, I don't like it. I don't like the distinction being like, oh, well, if you want to be pro-white, vote Republican, and if you want to be pro-minority, vote Democrat.
Right. I don't like that either.
What it is, because the Democrats, have policies that help white people, especially working class white people as well. So I don't like splitting up the racial interest groups by party lines.
I respect that. I don't either, but I respect the position where he's saying like it helps to remove racists from that party if you're being more acceptance of other minority, because like you just got like there's racism in.
Here's the thing: is
right.
racism me because so he like assumed that there was like racism. I think he showed Tucker Carlson and I don't remember everybody he showed, but he's assuming that some of those people are racist. I feel like racism isn't really as big of a problem today. Like the impacts of historical racism are, but like in terms of like actual like racist, even most Republicans aren't racist. Even white Republicans aren't racist. So I feel like that racist argument isn't as relevant. I mean, there's still racist individuals for sure. You still got Confederate flags and pickup trucks in the South, especially. Well, they exist, but I don't think it's that big of a problem in modern America.
I think it's still a problem. Because I think it's still a problem. I mean, you got theories like the replacement theory. You still have your
on the far right, the alt right, yes.
Yeah, I think just on the far right, and that's just like it's the right in general. I think like the far right has been the leader of the right. It's just like the far right has taken over the right, and that's why I think you still have it. Just because
take somebody like Ben Shapiro. Like I don't think Ben Shapiro's racist.
No, right. I don't even think Ben Shapiro.
I don't think Jordan Peterson's racist. Like there's a lot of right wing leaders that aren't.
You're absolutely right.
Aren't racist, and then their average person who likes those people, who listens to those people, who identifies as conservative, they're not racist either.
I agree. I 1,000% agree with you, but I just think like there are racist elements still on the right, and I think it's still there. I still think it's a problem in America. Yeah, I still think it's there. I think that whole replacement theory, and I think that's a huge issue. And I still think it's at the forefront of some people's mind. And I think that
Elon Musk talks about the replacement theory a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's just, and that has a lot to do with race. And I think that race is still at the forefront of people's mind on the right. But I do think it's like we're certainly, in terms of America, we're certainly at the best times in history as it relates to racial tensions. But we still have, I do still think we got some ways to go.
Yeah, I mean, we're not perfect. And you're never going to get rid of racism entirely. There's always going to be, it's just natural, right? Self-interest, people like people that look like themselves.
Right.
So there's always going to be some racism. It's just like if you compare it to what my great grandfather came to Ohio from Georgia. He said one of the reasons was he said as a grown man, he said I'm talking to a 5-year-old white kid, and he's like I gotta call him sir, and he calls me boy. And he's like I gotta get out of here. I'm going somewhere else. Like you can't do nothing. You in the South and my great grandfather's age. Yeah. You got to. Yeah, no. You can't fight, right? You got to go. So he left, came to Ohio, and then my grandmother had it worse than my dad, but not as bad as my great grandfather. My dad had it, not as bad as his mom, and I got it way better than my dad, right? So it's getting better.
Yep, it is. Like we can't say that I'm not one of the black people to say that times haven't gotten better, because it's just like, and to me, that discourages all the progress that people like
we made.
Right. Absolutely. It's just like Martin Luther King, our grandparents, all of those people, they fought battles. It's just like, so to say that things haven't gotten better, it's just like, I think that is a discredit and a disservice to them. Things certainly have gotten better. I think we just need to continue to be conscious of progress, just like they were. And I don't think we are. And eventually we'll get to a point to where it's not necessary, but I still think we got some ways to go.